Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're discussing the Didact, something that I felt was timely and necessary after a recent possible update on his status. We defeated him in Halo 4, he returned in Escalation and we composed him, but I don't think anyone really thought that was the actual end of the Didact. He was a character that had been hyped up in great masses since around 2007 in Halo 3, and for him to reach such an abrupt end that wasn't even in a game would be a pretty flat ending for such an important universe-changing character. After not being in Halo 5's campaign, however, his future, at least to me, was looking a little confusing and grim. But in the Warzone Firefight update, a Didact toy was added to Forge, and with it came a very interesting description. Not all visitors to the domain are strangers. Okay, so before we get into talking about any theories that could stem from this, I just want to say that this quote could mean absolutely nothing. It could just be referring to one of the many times the Didact accessed the domain before it was destroyed in the Forerunner Flood War. It could be referring to how he was meant to spend 100,000 years in his cryptum, accessing the domain, watching his past crimes back again to realise the bad and evil that he did, something that, as we know, didn't end up happening as the domain was destroyed. It doesn't necessarily mean that the Didact is alive, functioning or active. It could just be a little Easter egg reference for us lore fans who read the Forerunner trilogy. So with the boring dead-end disclaimer out the way, let's talk about what significance this quote has if it's not just a little reference. There are so many theories surrounding the Didact having an overarching influence on Halo 5, and most of these theories link heavily to him being in the domain or controlling it to some level. The two most popular ones are, of course, the Didact equals the Warden Eternal, and the Didact is or is controlling and manipulating Cortana, who's in the domain. This description obviously strengthens both of these theories, as it heavily suggests that the Didact was moved to the domain after he was composed. So before we move on to talk about the future of the Didact and his possible return, let's talk about these two theories, as they could explain how the Didact had a presence in Halo 5. First off, Warden equals Didact. Now, I really don't buy this one personally. Most of the evidence is either that he's an entirely new character that shares some of the same opinions on humanity as the Didact, that he's not a robot, and that he oddly has 6 fingers, just like the Didact does. I'm not kidding. This new evidence does kind of support the he's not a robot theory, as the other side to this theory is that he's a composed Forerunner, and that composed soul just happens to be the Didact. Other than that though, it doesn't really offer any new support to the Warden equals Didact theory, as it just hints that the Didact may be in the domain, and the Warden isn't just in the domain, he's the keeper of it, he's the guardian of it. Being the keeper is a little more important than just being in it. As for the Didact and Cortana theories, this new hint actually kind of supports it to some degree. A lot of the theories suggest that a fragment of Cortana survived the Mantle's approach crashing on Genesis and made it into the domain. However, the domain is controlled by the Didact, who is also in it. Of course, the toy description does support this. Some theories also use a quote from Cortana that identically mirrors a quote from the Didact in Halo 4 as evidence to suggest that Cortana in Halo 5 is really the Didact manipulating what was left of her that landed on Genesis, or that, seeing as he was composed, a fragment of Cortana is now the way he physically represents himself in the world. This description again supports both of these theories, as it suggests that the Didact has re-entered the domain where he needs to be to do either of the things I just spoke about. So in summary, the toy description strengthens both pools of theories, but especially the Cortana one, and actually, in my opinion, it makes this theory quite viable. Before we had this description released, I wasn't so sure about this, but now this sort of strengthens it a little bit. So this new description for the toy, along with these two theories, if they're obviously true, would suggest that the Didact did play a secretive and very integral role in Halo 5's story. Okay, so let's talk about what this description means for the Didact's future. It heavily hints at him being in the domain after being composed in Escalation. Now, this is a really difficult topic to talk about, seeing as the domain in Halo 5 has so many stark differences to the original precursor domain. For example, the new domain seems to be physical and actually accessible, as Cortana apparently physically entered it. It's also seemingly been rebuilt after the firing of the array destroyed it, which may be why it has different properties. It's also referred to as the Forerunner domain in Halo 5, which I initially thought was an error in the script, but honestly, as time has passed, I'm not so sure. Either way, this domain is different to the old one, which affects how the Didact actually gets to the domain, seeing as he was just another composed soul in the composer's abyss, and what he does when he's gained access to it. Like I just discussed, the Didact may just be part of the domain. If so, then it's possible he could come back as an Ancilla in the future, acting much like the Warden, so he'd be like controlling bodies or technology of some form. Or he may be something far more significant, like the Keeper of the domain, or even sort of leader of the domain. If you want to get even crazier, what if the Didact actually is the domain? What if the domain in Halo 5 is the Didact's collective consciousness? Think about it, Cortana's intentions in Halo 5 are near identical to the Didact's in Halo 4, to reclaim the mantle of responsibility into Forerunner possession, or, of course in this case, into created possession. After being thwarted twice trying to physically overpower mankind, what if the Didact decided to take a different route to do so after being composed? He'd already been exposed to the original precursor domain much more than mostly anything living in the galaxy, so he likely had the knowledge of its structure, makeup, etc. to recreate it to some degree. Now, this is when the domain being referred to as the Forerunner domain in Halo 5 comes in. If the domain in Halo 5 is the Didact's collective consciousness corrupting Cortana and enacting the Didact's original plan, then calling it the Forerunner domain is actually the correct name for it. It's not a typo. It's not the precursor domain anymore because obviously it's not created by the precursors. This is a new one created by the Didact. This means that if it's revealed in Halo 6 that this is the case, not only will the Didact be integral for the future, specifically for the creator's story arc, he will have been integral to Halo 5's story without us even knowing. Maybe eventually the Didact can take control of a body, much like the Warden does, and become something physical to act as a boss of some sort, so we actually get to fight him unlike a scripted QuickTime event in Halo 4. One last thing to note on this theory is that it could explain why the Warden, who is an Ancilla with such an important job, just follows Cortana's every move. It could also explain why the Warden is so hesitant to let Blue Team meet with Cortana. Maybe Cortana wanting to meet with Blue Team was part of the old Cortana, uncorrupted Cortana shining through, who isn't controlled by the Didact and simply wants to reunite with John. Either way, this theory is heavily supported by the toy description too, which is a good sign if you're a fan of this theory like I am. Wow, I genuinely think that was the craziest theory I've ever come up with. Maybe I should lay off those magic mushrooms for a bit. That's it for today, guys. Thanks a lot for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. The next video will be the story of Mendicant Bias in a traditional Hidden Experience story style. So I hope you look forward to that. It's going to be a good video and it's going to lead to many theory videos. Thanks again for watching and I'll see you then.